Hi there, this is Colleen from Keeping the Peace, and this is going to be a very quick disassembly reassembly of the Sig Sauer P938. I do have an older video with this information in addition to cleaning. It was unfortunately poor lighting and a dark background. It was very difficult to see what was going on. So in this video I'm not going to cover cleaning, I'm only going to cover disassembly reassembly. Okay, so here we go. First, you're going to remove the magazine and the round from the chamber and set those aside. We're going to lock it to the rear and just verify that we're empty. Okay, it's very difficult to see in there. If you prefer, you can do a digital check. Okay, so the weapon is empty. What we're going to do is go ahead and release the slide forward by pressing down on the slide stop, which on this particular handgun also doubles as your disassembly pin. The other side of that disassembly pin is this little knob sticking out on the other side of your frame, and that's going to come in handy in just a minute, so go ahead and familiarize yourself with what's on the other side. What you're going to want to do is notice that there's a little half moon shaped notch cut into your slide right here. You're going to line it up directly over top of this portion of your slide stop. So I like to pull it into that position with one hand and hold it so you can see the daylight coming through there because it's lined up. Once you have it lined up properly, you're going to push that little knob that I spoke about earlier from the other side and then pluck your disassembly pin out. Go ahead and let your slide go forward and then simply push on the rear of the slide. It's going to come straight off. You can lay your frame down along with your slide stop / disassembly pin. This portion is your slide, and it contains, well, several things, but as far as field stripping for cleaning, the only thing you really need to take apart here is your guide rod and recoil spring. Just a little bit of pressure we'll just slip it right out of there. So this is your guide rod and recoil spring. In your manual, it will mention the fact that you're supposed to keep the spring facing the way they had it when they sent it to you. And since it's difficult to tell which end is which, you may choose to mark the forward end of your spring. That's what I've chosen to do. You could make your own choice. You could mark this end of the spring if you wanted to, but I chose to put a tiny bit of paint pen, which may or may not come out in this video, but there's a tiny bit of pink Sharpie paint pen on this end of the spring, which is the end for me that goes forward. So there's your guide rods and your recoil spring. At that point, you will be able to just pick up the barrel. You're going to sort of pop it out of place a little bit, and it might be a little stubborn because it's kind of clicked in, but just kind of wiggle it around, and you're going to pick it up and out like that. So there is your barrel. Mine's a pretty tight fit. I've taken apart others that were not quite as tight a fit, but depending on yours, it may slip right out, or you may have to finagle it a little bit the way I did. And then here is your slide, and that's all you need to do for cleaning. That's as far apart as you need to take this gun for standard cleaning. Something to mention, if you are new to this handgun, this might alarm you a little bit. That's just your ejector. It's supposed to pop up like that, and it's not a big deal. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we're putting it back together. But if you've never seen that sticking out before, it might, concern you a little bit, but it's not a big deal. That's the way it's supposed to be. So there we go. Now we're going to put it back together. So you're going to take your slide and your barrel. Your barrel is going to slip in and then clink into place. You're going to be able to feel it clink into place like a puzzle. Boop. Makes a little noise like that. Then, and to me this is probably the most difficult portion of putting it back together, you're going to place the forward end of the spring into this little hole and carefully compress your recoil spring without bending it. That's the most difficult part. But you're going to slowly compress it, and your guide rod is just going to stick right back in that little slot. Okay, then you're going to feed the slide back onto your frame, starting here. And you're going to notice that your ejector prevents your slide from going fully onto the frame, so simply push it out of your way, and then your slide will go on the rest of the way. Now, at this point, I like to go ahead and put my slide stop pin or disassembly pin back in. You'll have to retract the slide very slightly in order for it to slip in. I do it this way because I'm used to working with 1911s, and I have, well, this little technique that I use to keep from getting that dreaded idiot scratch on your gun. That's what it's referred to in the 1911 community. What you don't want to do is slide this the slide stop up into this hole. I'm going to show you how to avoid that, because that will scratch your frame. Once you have it here, that will keep all of your internal parts in the position they need to be while you are retracting the slide. So at this point, I'm going to retract the slide until that notch is centered over this hole. Okay, so we're just going to get that lined up, and you can see if I can get it. There we go. Straight through like that. And now I'm going to pick this up slightly and then poke it right down in that hole. And then let the slide go forward. Okay, now it is fully back together. If you retract the slide first and then place the pin in the hole, a lot of times you will place the pin in the wrong spot and you will end up with guide rod sticking out the front. Your gun will not function that way. It just won't work. So if you put your gun back together and you find that you have guide rod sticking out the front, you need to take it back apart and try again. Okay? Alright, so let's go through that again really quickly. First thing you're going to do is center it, poke it out, let it forward, push it off, lay your frame down, disassembly pin down, go ahead and place a little bit of pressure on the guide rod, and recoil spring, and then your barrel will pick up and out. Okay, barrel goes back in. It'll clink right into place. Recoil spring in, gently compress, pop it in, make sure it's straight, feed it onto your frame, poke your ejector out of the way so the slide will go on. Go ahead and place your pin in the hole. You'll have to retract it very slightly for it to slip in. Go ahead and line up your half moon, pick up slightly, poke it in, let your slide go. Make sure that everything functions properly. You might even want to do a trigger press to make sure that your hammer falls. Do make sure that your guide rod is not sticking out the front, and everything's good to go. You're ready to, if you're like me, as quickly as you can, get her loaded back up and put her back on. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.